Parkside holds a vibrant space in the early colonial presence in this area of South Australia, with wheat farms, orchards, a dairy, a brewery, a broom factory, and the first Adelaide radio station, 5DN, broadcasting in 1924. This house plays its own unique part in the story of Parkside. Since we first moved in, we've considered ourselves custodians opposed to owners, and feel proud to be a small part of its history. This watercolour, painted by prominent architect John Hales while he lived here for a short time, has been passed along from owner to owner and reminds us there is much to value and cherish. The house was built in 1895 on land originally allotted to Christopher Rawson of Yorkshire. Henry Sanders, a plasterer, bought the land from Thomas English, who was the builder of Braysted just down the road, which is now a retirement village. The ornate plaster ceilings built by Sanders are still intact today. One of the previous owners had heard it was built as something of a show home to entice new customers and show off the styles available for purchase. There have been a number of renovations over the years, but the front half of the house is largely the same. A previous owner renovated extensively, installing a pool and a tennis court, which was made possible by the purchase of the neighbour's property at the rear. It gives a unique T-shape to the block. There have been a number of owners over the years, including Anne Milne, an Unley councillor, radio announcer Donald Nicholson, who worked at 5DN, and John Hales, architect and artist. One owner in particular stands out as a prominent figure in the communities of Unley and Parkside right from their inception. Born in New Jersey in 1864, James E. Robinson travelled to South Australia at the age of 14. He had an astonishing career. He was secretary of the Masters Butchers Association for 28 years, a Freemason for 48, and a Justice of the Peace. He was a councillor for Fullerton Ward when proclaimed a city in 1906. He was also a member of the Metropolitan County Board, Sturt Bowling Club, chairman of the Parkside School Committee, and a foundation member of the Parkside Methodist Church for 59 years. Here he filled every office in the church, including as a local preacher and circuit steward. All this whilst a husband and father of 3 sons and 6 daughters. We imagine his wife, Elizabeth Emma, was also very, very busy. As with families of the time, there was tragedy. The Robinsons' eldest son, Gilbert, died in the family home at the age of 19, brought down by fever. Another son, John Omar, served in France during the Great War. He would have almost certainly been living in the house at the time of enlistment, given his age of approximately 19. My great-uncle, John Gordon Mackenzie, who died at Fromell in 1916 while with the 32nd Battalion, enlisted a little earlier. John Gordon lost his life before John Omar enlisted, but it's very likely John Omar would have crossed paths with the soldiers my uncle served with. Like John Omar, my parents had to sign a form to allow me to enlist. As a parent and a son, I can't imagine what that must feel like, signing a letter to send your son to one of the bloodiest conflicts the world had ever seen. That letter was most likely written in this house. But we have to see it as they did during that time. Many of the men lied about their age to take up the adventure. We stumbled across John Omar's Second World War enlistment records, this time to serve in Gaza Ridge. A number of Anglo Avenue residents served, some making the ultimate sacrifice. Leslie Halifax, whose parents lived on Anglo Avenue, the Thornton brothers, and Scott Madden, who was awarded a military cross for bravery in France, also returned. His parents still living on Anglo Avenue. I find myself wondering how the street and how the community would have reacted, wanting to offer their support, but knowing the family members of their own are still at great risk. There are stories that palm trees were planted as memorials to those who served in the First World War, one of them being directly in front of our house. And other stories from this avenue continue to emerge. Doreen, our neighbour who passed away not long after we moved in, we called the Anglo Story Keeper. She is possibly the source of the rumour that this house was once a brothel, with calls from the balcony of who's next to the waiting men below. Researching the history of this house, we had no idea who had lived here over the years and who made it their home. There are amazing resources out there, all simple to use. I encourage anyone that has an interest in history to seek out their own stories. You'll never know what you find.